What's up everyone, and thank you for stopping by the channel. Today's project is this antique Poulan chainsaw, and the problem is it was given to me and I don't know if it runs. Let's take a good look at it, find out what's wrong with it, and hopefully we can fix it. In this video, we try and repair this chainsaw. However, it may not be the exact repair you need to make to yours. We'll explore other options later in the video. So this chainsaw was given to me by a friend, and my first impressions were that it was really old, but it's still in great shape. However, he couldn't tell me if it runs, so that's what we're going to try to figure out today. Now, I'm not a big fan of these tiny chainsaws from 30 years ago, and that's because they're kind of a hassle to fix, but they're really good saws. The best part about this design is that most of the body is metal and not plastic, so it's very durable. The biggest problem I see is the bar and chain, as both are very rusted. If we get this engine working again, I think both will need a good cleaning if it's not replaced. The next problem is the pull rope. For some reason, the rope isn't retracting completely, so we'll need to figure out that problem. That leads us to yet another problem. An easy test to figure out if the engine is worn out is to slowly pull on the rope. However, with half of the rope hanging out of the recoil, it doesn't give us a good idea of how worn out it is, so we'll need to see if we can fix that. The recoil assembly is part of the side cover, so we'll need to remove the bolts that hold it to the rest of the engine. The fuel tank will also come out with a cover as well. Now while we're here, we can inspect the pawls on the flywheel. They're spring-loaded and should return back to the center towards the nut holding the flywheel on the crankshaft. This is when we find yet another problem. This pawl isn't returning to position. It looks like we have a spring problem. Now you only need one working pawl, but it does put a lot more stress onto the recoil pulley, so it's best if we get it working like it's supposed to. This is the working pawl, and as you can see, one end is supposed to wrap around the pawl and the other is supposed to be anchored to one of the fins, but it looks like the other spring's anchor end has come off. I think we can reuse the spring and rewind it so it grabs the nearest anchor. Now if the spring breaks, then we'll need to replace the spring, and surprisingly you can still order them. Now once the anchor is in place, I'll spray some lubricant on it and check that it's working smoothly. Now back to the recoil. If I pull on the rope, you can see the recoil works fine and that it tries to pull all the rope back in. I'm not sure what's happened, but there must be a spring problem, but I don't think it's broken. I think the end that engages the pulley might have slipped. Now the easiest test would be to put a few more turns on the spring and see if it happens again. If it does, then I'll address it, but I don't want to put any more time and money on other parts of the chainsaw till I know I can get it working again. So I ended up adding 2 more turns on the spring, and it looks to be just enough to get all the rope back onto the pulley. Just be careful not to add too many turns, otherwise the spring will bind up when you pull on it. Now since I have this opportunity, I'll lubricate the pulley and the spring. After that's done, I'll install the recoil back on the engine and then slowly pull on the rope and feel how much the engine is fighting back. So the engine is fighting back, but it's not anywhere near where it's supposed to be. That could mean that the engine is slightly worn out, but we should have enough compression for the engine to start and run. The next thing I want to do is put some fuel into the carburetor's throat and try starting it. If it runs, then we'll know that we have enough compression for it to run and that we have spark. If it doesn't run, then we'll need to test for both. Unfortunately, it did not start, so that means we need to test to see if we have spark and compression. Now, the easiest way for me to test for spark is to use a spark checker. You can find these at your local auto parts store or online for a few dollars. Simply install it in line with your spark plug, pull the rope a few times, and watch for an orange glow in the middle of the tester. As you can see, we do have spark, which is, believe it or not, good and bad news. The bad part is that it means we have a compression problem. For this part, I'm going to remove the spark plug and install a compression tester. Now you can find these at your local auto parts store or online for around $15. We want to see a number over 100 psi, and the higher the better. If it's lower than 100, we might have to look inside the engine for a problem. So this isn't a good sign. The spark plug is covered in oil and carbon buildup. This usually tells me that the fuel mix was extremely heavy with oil. With it heavy in oil, carbon will build up in the engine, covering the spark plug and clogging the spark arrestor screen. So the reading is about 70 psi, which is not good news at all. It's low enough that the engine is very unlikely to start. It's usually at this point that we decide either to hang it on the wall as decoration or keep trying to fix it. I think I'll continue with the diagnostic to at least figure out if there's any hope in fixing this chainsaw. I want to look inside the engine and see what kind of damage it has, and the easiest way to do that is to remove the muffler and look at the piston and the ring. If the piston and ring are not damaged, then we could probably just replace the ring and get another season out of it. However, if the ring and piston show signs of gouging, then it's probably not going to be repairable. Before we look at the piston, take a look at the spark arrestor screen. It is almost completely clogged. This would have kept the engine from working properly. If we get this engine working again, we're definitely going to have to clean the screen or replace it. So here's the exhaust side of the piston, and as you can see, it has some gouging on it. If I slowly pull on the rope, we can move the piston inside the engine, and it just keeps getting worse. The thin vertical strip you see is the piston ring, and as you can see, it's gone as well. To fix this problem, we'll have to take the entire engine apart, replace the cylinder, the piston, and the ring, and I hate to say it, but they simply don't make replacement parts for this ancient model anymore. The only other way would be to find another chainsaw with good parts on it, but finding this model isn't easy or cheap, and this thing simply isn't worth a lot of money. So what do I think happened to this chainsaw? Well, the best guess is that the last refueling it had, more than likely somebody put straight gas in it, and that's why this piston is torn up the way it is. The other possible option is that it overheated because the exhaust gases weren't able to leave the engine because the spark arrestor screen was 90% clogged up due to running higher than normal oil to gas mixtures. Now always remember to keep your mixed gas cans well marked from your straight gas cans, and also remember to put your oil into the can first before you pour your gas into it. Now, unless you have a sentimental attachment to it, it might be worth it for you to try and fix it because at that point I'm assuming it's priceless to you, and if it takes a couple $100s to fix, then it's worth it. I, however, have zero attachment to the saw, so for me, it's best if I keep it in my collection till I at least find another one like it. At that point, I'll see if I can combine the two saws to make one good running saw. However, I doubt that I could ever sell it because it's simply too out of date to find the parts it needs to keep running. Now, it's a real shame that this chainsaw had to die this way because in my mind, it was very preventable. These older saws were built a lot sturdier than the saws of today, so I really do hope I find another part saw so I can get this one working again. So my question is, should I even bother trying to fix this saw if I happen to find a parts saw? Is this antique worth fixing, or am I just wasting my time and money on something that nobody would want to buy or even use? Thank you for watching. I really appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions, and I hope to see you in the next video.